2, 3. Fuck, downstairs. Stephen Downey, what is your favourite game?
My favourite game is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So I first got into playing games probably, if you go way back, it's probably the BBC Micro in school. Yeah, I think I first started playing those silly little educational games, and then I think my mum and dad sort of realised that there's maybe there is some sort of a benefit to these game things that aren't just silly nonsense. And I actually don't know which one I got. But it was my mum and dad picked it up in some sort of like a flea market or one of them small markets, like sort of pre-owned. But it was either like a BBC one or one of the Apple small devices. And I keep on asking my dad which one it was, and he says it's like a non-generic brand. But I'm sure to someone it's a really classic brand, but he doesn't remember which one it was. Basically that was like Frogger, which I know sounds like it's not really a start to the game, but I spent so many hours up in that attic playing in my house. You would stick the tape on, go down and have dinner, come back up again, and the tape would have loaded in the cassette player, and me and my sister sat and played Frogger and basically Frogger for about 2 years. that was the only game I had. And eventually, I think I must have been about maybe 10 or so before I moved into, everyone in school was talking about their Mega Drives and their Nintendos and stuff. So I finally got myself a Mega Drive 2 then. So I would have been like Sonic and Shinobi and those sort of like classic titles. But I think my sister then, being contrary, she would have had the Super Nintendo at that point.
So better platform wars within the Downey household.
Exactly, and I'm sure I spent as much time. I think at that point already it would have been Mario 3. Would have been the first Mario game we had in the house. So, but I think I would have spent as much time. And then mine would have been Sonic and Knuckles. So we both sort of come on near the sort of like the end of the sort of like that generation and those franchises. I think I sort of went back. I think one of my friends had there was a Nintendo. He had Duck Hunt and he had the first Mario, and I played it in his house a few times. But my first real experience was Sega Mega Drive 2 and the Super Nintendo. But they weren't just and then you sort of hopped in each other's bedrooms and you were sort of playing for hours, and that was really good fun. And then I switched. I betrayed Sega and I went to the N64 when it was time to upgrade. But I think that's when I really I think that's when you really first noticed the games and what they were doing. So if I remember gasping whenever it would have been in the Zelda Ocarina of Time, and there was a point where I was trying to solve a puzzle and it hadn't told you that if you put the wooden stick, which I thought was a weapon, you put the wooden stick on the flame, it sets fire, you can light up the other flames, which opens the door. And I was like, I wonder and I couldn't solve it for it. I wonder if I get this wooden stick and I'll just light a fire. And it worked. And I was like, oh my god, people have and I think that's when it clicked that people were behind the scenes designing these things and coming up with all these different scenarios. So Dawn played and then GoldenEye was really big amongst our friend circle. Would have been getting together in people's houses, and I suppose I was around 15 or so then, maybe a bit younger. And that was when that was more like the community was growing around games, and I really got into them. And then I took a really big break after that. So,
wow!
Yeah.
Like how long did you take?
about 10 years. I didn't. So I got Majora's Mask because I loved Ocarina of Time so much, but I don't think I finished Majora's Mask.
Ooh.
And I think that might have been when I was sort of waning interest, and it might have been going to, sort of like in the later years of school, sort of like, and then maybe moving on to like university and stuff. So I didn't play games for like, about 10 years. So I came back to games. I sort of admired them from afar, but it was part of it was like a money thing, like I just couldn't afford a console myself, and all these sort of 40, 50 pound games. It was a hobby that I knew if I was going to get back into was going to end up being, pretty expensive in a way as well. And I was spending my money buying comic books, so I had it was one or the other, I think, for my own budget. And then some of the comic guys were all starting to play like Gears of War, and I went to one of their houses, and it just blew me away, like the sort of the graphics quality, and they're running around with this massive, laser. I was like, holy crap, this is a proper leap from what I was playing, on the N64.
You were starting to come back towards that sort of golden generation of PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 type games, and when the Wii was just become this massive, huge thing in a way.
Yeah, so I sort of skipped the first couple of PlayStations. I know PS1 was technically at the same time as the N64, but I'd chosen the Nintendo route. So I sort of missed all these sort of like, adult games, when adult was in like gory, so I missed out on Resident Evil, didn't really bother with any of those things. I seen someone play it once, I was more into Mario then, and in GoldenEye, I suppose. And then, so my wife, it was then my girlfriend, she bought me Xbox 360 at the end of near the end of its life, so like Gears of War 3 would have been out already. So and then I just once I was playing Gears of War 3, and so the first time playing online multiplayer as opposed to waiting for somebody to come around to your house to play GoldenEye every now and again, and then I loved that. I think that's when I really got back into sort of the console and sort of bigger games then from sort of Gears 3 onwards, and then that 360. What else would I have played then? I suppose around. I sort of stuck to the sort of big titles, for a while, and then eventually we did get whenever the PS4 was getting cheap, we got the PS4 to use as a Netflix device, because it was actually going to be. I mean, it was getting so cheap, it was less expensive than to buy, another device. But then I got into Uncharted 4. I think maybe 3 was out then, and then sort of went back and played all the Uncharted games, and then I played a couple of the like God of War and stuff, and really got into those first person titles that I couldn't get, on Xbox. So that was me stuck in again. And I've sort of carried on with every console since. I
love how you basically mentioned how Gears of War 3 was just sort of basically your sort of entry into sort of the whole online multiplayer social aspect, because like that was basically near enough the equivalent for me in regards to the original Gears of War back in the day, like 2006. That was my sort of first entry in the online gaming, anyway, like that, and Project Gotham Racing 3 on the Xbox 360, and like just sort of hearing that just sort of reminds me of that sort of golden time when where Xbox 360 just basically had a lot of great multiplayer games, especially for Xbox Live anyway, like especially Gears of War, and like Halo 3 hadn't even come out yet at that time. Like it was about a year out yet before that came out.
Yeah, well, I must have got Gears of War 3 as in like it was the latest title. It wasn't at launch. I would even got it a bit later. So I think my first Halo was Halo Reach. So funnily enough, like coming in and people saying that's one of the better later games, and that was actually my first experience. But it came with the Halo 3 multiplayer disc. So I actually played Halo 3 multiplayer through Halo Reach. But yeah, it was another brilliant sort of online multiplayer, and different, it's sort of similar enough gameplay, but it was my first time playing a first person shooter online, and that was again that was a nice change from the Gears of War, hiding, duck and hide, sort of shoot behind the corner, and all of a sudden you're you have the blast forward of Halo and just keep moving. So that was a really great experience, and I think by the end it sort of polished the multiplayer. It was running smooth. I was able to connect really quick and jump on and play games with strangers. Really, I wouldn't really play much. I hadn't got that many friends that were playing console games, so I was able to hop on and play with very randomly, but really good fun.
Like Halo Reach was definitely a good time to jump in with everything in that series, and it's like Halo 3, like what can you, like from the 360 era, like Halo 3 was just absolutely phenomenal. Halo 3 ODST, I think, is just super brilliant, and Reach
Oh,
was.
you're right. I did get ODST first. That's what I
Oh,
got. No, sorry, yeah. So I bought ODST as a standalone and got the Halo 3 disc.
that's right, yeah.
And then moved into Reach afterwards. So Reach was the first one I think I bought myself, like as a follow up.
Yeah. No, that's right. I was thinking, but yeah, I think that sort of 360 era of Halo games, anyway, like from 3 to Reach, anyway, were just sort of the golden peak of that series for me, anyway. Like after that, it was just a bit. Four's multiplayer was great. 4 story was whereas 5 story was but I've not played multiplayer. I've not played the multiplayer on 5, but oh, that's Xbox One, not Xbox 360. But I digress.
Yeah.
But yeah, the touchback and so I don't know if you mentioned it, but like there was one other game that you didn't mention when you were talking about your sort of N64 days. Like, 'cause you said you were playing Ocarina of Time and Majora and all that there, but there was one game that I'm sort of interested that was sort of conspicuous by its absence, and that's Mario 64.
Oh yeah, I loved that as well. Yeah,
Oh.
I think it was only because like I think I probably got Mario 64 and Diddy Kong Racing with the sort of as my one of them bundles you get, or
Yeah.
I got it for Christmas, but it was one of the bundles I got.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
It was
so-
basically the same for my Xbox 360 as well.
okay, yeah.
Like I got Gears, PGR free on Boxing Day, but bundle I got for my Xbox 360 was Gears, PGR, a MotoGP game, and God forgive me for even saying this, Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball.
See, I that's a whole generation of games that I just skipped. You know, I recognize a couple of the brands that are coming back, but other than that, I didn't play any of those games really, or I didn't play it. But no, yeah, Mario and Diddy Kong. But I think it was my first time playing 3D games. I think it actually must have went up to like Toys R Us and played a tiny bit in the they used to have the Wii display consoles you could go and play. But getting my hands on that Nintendo stick, and I think that was that before the rest of them had sticks. Yeah. So like, and it was just like a revelation of moving around in 3D, and it was weird. Like in retrospect, only having the one stick and having to control the camera with the sort of the yellow D-pad sort of. But but I think it was only because when I was playing those, I was just so fascinated by the move into like wow, these are new games, it's 3D, and didn't even think about the game design really. It wasn't until it was only because I mentioned Zelda, because that was the first time I went, oh, someone's making these puzzles, someone's thought ahead of me and thought wood fire, that sort of thing. But those were brilliant games as well.
Did you not have that thought with the later Mario games, like especially like, well, at least in my opinion, like Galaxy or Odyssey? I
didn't really. I would have I had a Wii, but it was it was my like girlfriend's family Wii, so I didn't actually probably maybe because they're real Nintendo fans. So when I started so they were banning them games themselves, but I didn't really I might have played some of them, but I didn't really get as invested as in the later Mario games. Even I don't know why, I just didn't really follow the series after 64. I think I know I've played some of them, but I definitely didn't play them the whole way through. Oh, what's the one that came out? I played the one on the Switch.
Oh, that's Odyssey.
Yeah, Odyssey. Yeah, so it was brilliant, but obviously I was already making games at that point, so I was thinking about it, but from a different point of view.
Oh no, fair enough.
So I started off my career as a comic book artist. I always wanted to draw comics, and I was really just have a love of I was always reading books, reading stories, and always drawn. So to me, comic books at the end were the medium that you could draw and tell a story at the same time. So I did that for a few years. I thought to myself, I'll go to art college, I'll be a better artist, I'll do this stuff. And then I applied to art college, sort of recommended by the art teachers and people who had actually visited the school from art college. But I was so burnt out then that I didn't apply for foundation year. And I thought, let's apply for fine art. That's what I like doing. I like drawing. And they were sort of like, you've really applied for the wrong thing. You've come with comic art, and you're showing and some paintings. But you really need to do foundation first, and then go into that fine arts thing. So come back and apply again next year for foundation. And I think by then I'd sort of been working in comics. I sort of I got that step in the career myself already. So it was about I didn't bother going, or I didn't. I was rejected, followed by I'm not going to bother going after all, the art college. So sort of was just my own portfolio and career wise. Worked in a comic store for Forbidden Planet. It was called Talisman then. for a while, and then moved on to drawing comics for a couple of years. I do some stuff like How to Train a Dragon and Flash Gordon, Jennifer Wilde, obviously as well back then. And then just when you're in that industry, a lot of people are hopping and have their parallel careers. So there's some I think I was showing people some samples, and they said, look, with the iPhone and the 3DS coming out around then, there was a comeback for 2D art. Because beforehand I never thought of working in games because it all seemed to be, it was all 3D, and I didn't really know there was a sort of industry there for 2D art. So I was starting to get asked to draw some backgrounds for 3DS games. I think I did some Need for Speed, and like War in the World is Coming San Diego was out on the Switch, or the what would have been the Wii? Yeah, the Wii, I think. So and it's they did 2D backgrounds because it was going to be a sort of smaller game. And I sort of went, wow, I love seeing people walk around inside my art, or in front of my art. It's really cool. And so I sort of got this bug for making games and making these interactive worlds that were all hand drawn and nice looking. So it looks like comics, but it plays like a game. It's sort of what I then wanted to move into. And so I found a programmer. There was a programmer. He was a podcaster as well. He did Comic Book Outsiders was the name of his podcast. Semi-related. There's no legal there's no legal connection there, but it is. I sort of stole the name from that. It was like Outsider Games. But he was a programmer, and he wanted to make. He'd been making some games, and I was an artist that wanted to make games. He hadn't got an artist. I hadn't got a programmer. So they teamed up, and we actually pitched the Arts Council here. They had a thing called SIF, which was the Creative Industries Innovation Fund. It was very small comparatively, and it was like I think a £10,000 grant, which if you're making a game is not really much at all, but it's enough for us to sort of like pay ourselves a tiny bit, and then hire in an animator and a sound designer.
Basically a prototype?
No, they built the whole game. But I obviously spent a lot of sort of like unpaid hours. Sort of spent it over the next year ourselves making that, and then we published that. That was when the iPhone was really the apps people were making their millions off the iPhone store. When we pitched the funds, everyone was making millions. By the time we got the game out, there was like 1,000 apps a day being published, on the iPhone store. So it didn't make a lot of money, but it worked as a really good portfolio piece. So we ended up sort of pitching for some work for the BBC, and did some other custom installations around sort of Northern Ireland. They commissioned us to do like a little spaceship game for that, and we ended up getting commissioned by Lionsgate to do a Magic Mike game, and it was meant to be a different movie they were meant to do, and then it didn't pass the licensors because they had their own app and didn't want a competitor. So they says they had the funds, and it says, look, we actually really want an app or a game for this movie. Can you do that instead? And we said, yeah, sounds good. We'll switch over the name of the game on the contract. Before we'd actually seen what the movie was, and of course it was a male stripper, Magic Mike. So we're like, oh, we've got to make a game out of this now. So I think they sent us a DVD, but I just been watching the trailers anyway, and it's like I can think of a game. I can see some rhythm, going on here. So we basically built a really small, very quick rhythm game. It might still be out there somewhere. It's Magic Mike the Moves. You might see some trailer or something somewhere. It might still be live on an app store. I don't think so though. So as the updates came along, but so we did that, and then but then we're building these smaller games, but I was playing the console games. I was playing bigger games, and sort of like I thought to myself, I'd really love to just one day save up enough money in our company and build our own. So did some work for hire stuff, just doing like educational games and stuff for a couple of clients, and then saved up enough money, brought that on Ireland Screen, and says, look, we have enough money for ourselves, but want to hire on an animator and more staff for the next sort of 18 months and build a sort of PC game, because that's where we wanted to tell bigger stories and bigger characters. And then so that's that was that's where the company grew a good bit, and we built Whalen Heights for PC, and then moved it over to console a year later.
let's talk of your favourite game, The Witcher 3. Well done. Before we get going any further, we must apologise for the sound in here because, like, we've tried making it as best as we've tried making it as not as echoey as possible, but we're also on a very busy road of Belfast, anyway, where cars are coming past, and we've basically, this won't make sense to anyone outside of Downey. We basically have the SDLP downstairs, so we apologise for basically talking games while basically Stormont tries to do its business, whatever little business it does, it end up doing. Anyway, so you mentioned that sort of comeback towards the sort of console high-end gaming type thing towards the end of, not the end of, well, I guess it was the end of 2011. Did you play around the time The Witcher 1 or The Witcher 2?
No, skip them all together.
Oh wow!
And I still haven't gone back. I have them on Steam. You know, I bought them for like 99p on Steam, but never went back. I've had some friends who ended up being like, you know, big fans, and I went back and just said, play them, but they're pretty clunky, and I just didn't want to invest, you know, 80 hours into playing something that was going to be clunky.
The Witcher 1 is pretty clunky, and The Witcher 2 though is not. It's not aged as bad, anyway. Like for a 10-year-old game, that still relatively holds up, anyway.
Well, how many hours do you need to play Witcher 1 for?
I think when I say clunky, I mean more in the gameplay side, anyway. But like story wise, I would say you're looking at least 10 hours in order to get invested.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to play 10 hours of a clunky game. Just I've got so little time as it is to play any gaming that if I get an hour a week, that's good. So it would take me 10 weeks to play a clunky game, but I can't play anything else.
Well, you get an hour a night for something like, so you could probably get it done within 2 weeks.
An hour a week.
Oh, an hour a week. Oh, fuck no.
Well, sometimes an hour. Yeah, sometimes I get a bit more. But.
Oh, fuck no. Yeah, no, fair enough. Jesus, no, fair enough. I mean, Witcher 2 you can actually buy, you can play on Xbox because it came out in Xbox 360 and it should be backwards compatible on Xbox One. So and as a result, Xbox Series X and all that there. So like, that should be a lot more doable anyway. And I think Witcher 2 has a catch up thing anyway with the Witcher 1 anyway. So like, you wouldn't be too caught out anyway if you decided to go back and play.
I'll see.
So, you know, like start pestering Stephen now to play Witcher 2 once we're done here, basically. not immediately after we're done, because like we're here in his office, so like don't do that. So talking solely then of The Witcher 3, what sort of attracted you to play the game anyway in the first place?
So I think I tend to play one big game a year. So that's like, you know, one big open world game a year. And it must have been I think I must have got the PS4, and then I was like, okay, let's let's pick one of these. And I think it was usually it's for my Christmas wish list. You know, I sort of look at what's coming out that year and sort of pick one of the big ones. I think the option was it was a Fallout 4 or The Witcher.
Yeah, they
3,
both came out
and that's
that
what
year.
that's what I was going to choose between. And I just reading reviews and stuff, and I didn't know anything about the Witcher franchise. I just heard people like raving about it in online articles and just, you know, saying how good it was. And then so it must have been already out. You know, like a month. You know, people were all since it came out in October, and I was picking this game. I was picking my wish list.
It would have been a few months at that point.
Yeah. So so The Witcher 3 for PS4, and then maybe PS4 Pro. Yeah, probably. And then and apparently it was gorgeous. It looked good. They were saying like there's a lot of depth to the gameplay. If you want to go in that deep, you can. And that was really it. So actually, in the end, I got the gift of both those games for Christmas, and I still haven't played Fallout 4.
Oh,
so I think I loaded the boot screen. I just one of them things where I knew I was only going to play one big game, and if I'm going to put 40 hours into it, it's the same as, you know, like I'm saying, if they don't have, even then I didn't have, you know, that many time for big games. So just that was it. Just online reviews. Just people had said it was that good, and it was one of the big games this year. You know, let's give it a go.
So, yeah, like talk to me about that sort of concept of having to choose between that sort of big game that you would play once a year, like that big open world game? Like, what's the spot process? Like, you mentioned reviews and all that there. Like, is there any more sort of that helps help weigh up your choices basically in terms, because like time is a lot more of a precious commodity now, especially COVID and all that there. So, like, yeah, like talk to me a little bit about that and sort of how you sort of weigh up your choices anyway.
I think that the other extra thing was that I'd looked about what was coming out or what was out this year and what was going to look good, and I think if I did have the PS Pro, the PS Pro, I would have wanted something that had like high end for PlayStation, graphics. So maybe something that was able to either render 4K. I mean, maybe it wasn't the PS Pro, but I have something that was going to look good on my nice TV, whatever. And then, but I think I'd found these two games, Fallout and Witcher, and I think I was talking about it in the studio. I was just like, and then I think it might have been John. It says, Witcher 4 is going to be the definitely that's a brilliant game, and he played it, and just in terms of like instant gameplay, he says like Fallout 4, they're both two different worlds and they're nicely well built, and the world building's good, but if you want instant gratification from the actual like combat and gameplay, Witcher's the better the better game in that way. So I think that might have sort of swung it for me. So it is like obviously reading the articles, but it is if they're both getting, and I'm not sure if Fallout 4 had even been reviewed then. Because I know it didn't, like, the reviews weren't really brilliant, but the hype was coming out.
I mean, like, Fallout 4 did review pretty well, I mean, like it did. Like, it was Fallout 76.
Oh yeah. I had the
So that was the one that didn't review well, but Fallout 4 definitely reviewed well anyway. I remember that very well, like reviewed very well. Was another aspect, like in terms of the theming of both games, I mean, like in terms of both Witcher being very fantasy-esque, Fallout being sort of futurist, sort of 50s like America, like nuclear war and all that there. Like, was there a preference over one or the other as well?
See, I don't think there was, because I knew they were both like fantasy in their own way. But like I didn't. I mean, I was never really been a person to say. But I was never really into fantasy games. Like I didn't play Final Fantasy. I didn't play any of those sort of sword and sorcery or Dungeons and Dragons. That never really appealed to me. So I would say I almost got The Witcher despite it's fantasy. But then with the whole like wasteland type approach to Fallout. That's I still haven't played it, so I assume it's got a lot of wasteland in it. Yeah, sort of like I knew it wasn't going to be very realistic and down to earth. So no, it actually didn't. So I think it was just down to like people saying how good this is, irrespective of the sort of. But I'm saying there's different reasons why it's my favorite game. That's only the reason why I bought it in the first place, just to see what was going to be good that year. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, just with that in mind, did you play Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas beforehand?
No.
Oh.
No, I think I missed that. Yeah, I would have missed those. I think people were talking about Fallout or New Vegas before I bought the console. Maybe just before I bought the console, and I didn't really go back. But I'd heard it was really good, but I never really actually just made my way back to it. Okay.
No. The reason I say that as well is because I totally get where you come from in terms of the sort of fantasy-esque aspect of games like The Witcher. Like, they do not stand out to me, they do not sort of appeal to me. And yet I would have played Skyrim for like half a dozen hours or so, enjoying that in spite of that fantasy aspect. Yeah. So like I would have played Fallout in some regards would be a lot more up my street than the Elder Scrolls anyway. And Starfield is a lot more up my street anyway, in terms of what it's trying to do with sci-fi and space and stuff like that there than Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. So basically I'm trying to say is I totally get where you're coming from in terms of sort of how you sort of got into these games in spite of their theming anyway.
Yeah, I think as well. I think I was aware that there was Witcher comics that had been adapted from the books back then, and you don't tend to get a lot of adaptations of generic material. Sort of like if someone's going to buy a license for a book, usually it has a bit of depth to it or some interesting characters. It isn't just random orcs and stuff, and random, nothing. Yeah, like I said, nothing too generic. So I think I did have a sort of feeling that there was a bit more to the game than just bland fantasy.
So you said you got a lot of gratification anyway out of the gameplay anyway, like especially I would imagine a lot of that came from the combat anyway.
Well, I was promised gratification. I don't know if I got it. No, I did. I did. I also I'm one of them people, like when it says, do you want to play easy, hard, blah, 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 I've got to research which one is the best way to play the game. Do you know? So like, especially like, because I hadn't really played any open world stuff really at that point. Well, apart from Red Dead Redemption, but I didn't know how to play it. I thought it was I thought the whole game was about shooting rats because I didn't know where to go next, and I didn't realize there was a big gold marker on the map. So I was researching what was the best way to play it, and it said if you play it on hard, whatever the hardest, then you're going to get more depth out of the potions and such. And then I kept on getting murdered by the chimera type thing, the big what do you call it? What was it? Is it a horse falcon? Something. It's a griffin. It is a griffin.
Yeah.
So and then so I kept getting murdered, and I think it dropped down one to just hard, not super hard. And then I got a lot more gratification out of this. So it was still hard enough where you had to keep on using, sort of. I'm very much a sidestepper. Whenever the people are coming in, sort of sidestep and get them on the it's essentially a roll, but in which it's a bit more. The animations aren't that extreme. So yeah, sort of sidestep, get the sword in, take a potion every hit. So I did a lot of depth out of that, sort of playing on and being one of the harder games that I played then. At that point, I found it really, really fun to play.
Talk specifically on the sort of combat then, because like this is it's not the main thing, but it's one of the main things anyway that sort of turned me away from The Witcher 3, because like I want to like The Witcher 3. Anytime I've played The Witcher 3, it's one of the few things that sort of turned me away from the game, and that's the combat. It just feels I don't quite know how to find the words for it, but I don't like it. I can't quite gel with it no matter how hard.
Yeah, I think it feels quite thick.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that might be like the animations can be quite realistic, which means it can be steady, slower paced. But you're expected to still hit the enemies that are right in front of you. And if you're a button masher, I think it really doesn't work at all, because if you're hitting those buttons and you're expecting instant hits, or you're expecting to not get hit by an enemy, then I think that's how I first tried to play it. It just didn't work for me. It was like, why isn't this working? And then when you get into that flow, there is more depth than you sort of think, and you can play a really nice flowing game. That it's like if you put the Batman Arkham series.
Yeah.
So if you put that on like 0.8 speed, that would actually be more what we sort of described with the gameplay, where you can actually move your way in between enemies and juggle and slice and keep the action flowing, but it's at a much slower pace. Well, it's at a good bit slower pace than sort of like the more arcadey games. So yeah, I think it is, for me it is, like sidestep and move, turn around, get your shot, or get your sword in position, 3 slashes, dodge the next enemy, move in, do a bit of crowd control, use a move, and I like the sort of like I've always loved that when you hit your sort of what does he call them, his mutations or his powers, where the whole thing slows down a good bit, so then you get a chance to think about your move, what's happening. And then you sort of have then you move into your once you're in a while, you start to get your tactics, where you're like, okay, I'm always going to keep a coin up, I'm always going to keep always keep one shield at all times, move around, and then so it can it takes a while, because like I say, it is a bit it's not. I don't think it is clunky. I think it is just a bit thick and a bit slow paced. But once you get into it, you really can move your way around and work out. It is like you're playing in the mud at all times.
Yeah.
But if you think of it as like I'm a witcher, I'm in the swamp. I need to know where to move, where to dodge, when to hit, when to use a spell. Then it actually works really well for me.
I don't even necessarily think it's just clunky. It's just the sort of way to describe it really is, I think, like you say, I'm not necessarily a button masher, but I do like to play it at a bit more of a faster pace.
Yeah.
Than it probably advertises, and I think that's one element as to why I just can't quite gel with The Witcher 3. And when I say I can't quite gel with The Witcher 3 and all that isn't to say The Witcher 3 isn't a bad game. It is. It's a really good game from what I've played of it. It's just those two fundamental things, and we'll touch upon the other fundamental thing in a bit, is just like again, like that's just sort of one of the few things that sort of turn me away from The Witcher 3 anyway. It's just sort of the combat anyway.
Yeah.
It's just sort of it's not that I don't want to be turned away by The Witcher 3. Like from what I played of it, like I said, it's a really good game, but again at the same time, it just does not suit the sort of playstyle that I have basically.
I'm sure there's like a PC mod where it can where it turns it into super fast hack and slash. If you could find that somewhere else, Steve, might be helpful.
It's not even hack and slash I found I'd be sort of looking for. It's just, it feels like in a way it's an action RPG that's advertised as such, but when in reality it's sort of played like a turn-based RPG.
I wouldn't say that at all. No,
Not necessarily
just
that.
the pace of it, you mean?
Yeah.
And then I suppose I do like that element where you sort of you freeze time, and that almost does make it a bit turn based.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, oh, freeze. Okay, I can set fire to all these 4 people at once, and you need to get a bit of time to have that thought. And sometimes you do need to have to freeze the game.
Those elements I would be happy with in terms of that there, but when it's actually in the sort of combat itself, that's sort of what I just sort of like. Yeah, when I want to take a sword to something or whatever, that's just sort of what sort of takes me out of it for the most part. Anyway, like when you're using powers like slowing down time, just sort of they sort of take pace of everything and just sort of like see what you need to do, what you have to do. That I understand, that I get, but like when you're doing like an actual combat aspect of it, it's just like, yeah, no, I can't gel with it basically.
Makes sense.
I think though the one thing The Witcher 3 gets a lot of plaudits for is just how it's just some of the world design in the game basically. Like it's just like it's varied as well, like very varied. Like talk to me a little bit about how you found that anyway.
Yeah, I think that was lovely, wasn't it? Like you go from these expansive green fields and huts, and you go to somewhere like Novigrad, and you have these amazing architecture and buildings, and just it feels like a proper different place. It does, and even the you go to Skellige and you hear these Northern Ireland accents and stuff that are all. Did you get that far in the game? But there's a lot of Northern Irish accent out there. But they're all done by Polish people, I believe. As I've been told by the sort of few of the team were saying, they're all local actors who are just doing Northern Ireland accents. It's like, that's pretty cool, and they did it really well. But and then of course I like how even the quests will change to adapt that, so if you're out doing a lot of shop based stuff in Novigrad, if you go to Skellige, you're talking about going at the boats and diving and fighting chests and a lot of like monsters in the swamps. So you just and even there's like these really silly drama play based quests when you go into Novigrad. Each little area has its own theme, and it just works in all different ways, really, really well.
So talk to me about that sort of adaptation of how quest designs would sort of change around the world itself, because I don't think I got that far out of that sort of initial bit of the game, and I played a good bit of that of the start of the game, and I think I put in about 15-20 hours, which is like a good length of time anyway, like even for games. But I don't think I even made it that far.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, talk to me about that.
Again, I think that's what I was saying, that I mean it's still the main story's going straight through the same sort of way, but obviously a lot of the and I think it's there's a lot of question marks in that game on the map, and it does actually get a bit I don't think I did that many of the question marks. I'm not really a ticker offer. Some people are, but my wife had to make sure every single question mark was gone in that game, so she played a lot more actually than me in the end. But yeah, it's just like Skellige has a lot of question marks in the water, and it's just and a lot of it is it's like diving down, fighting chests, fighting monsters along the sort of swampy beach. Obviously, a lot of this, there's not much in the way of buildings, so you're not meeting a lot of as many people in terms of they're all badly dressed. They're all they're different type of people. So it's usually go out and find someone or kill someone or that sort of quest. While if you go to Novigrad, a lot of it is like, can you find the key to my to my chest? I've forgotten my robes. You know, so that does it's I mean a lot of it is, you know, fetching combat quests in a way, but just the way it's themed, it's, you know, it's a lot more silly and flippant, and you're dealing with a lot sort of a different class of people when you're in Novigrad. So it's more the reskinning of the way that the quests are presented. That ends up being quite funny. You know, and there's horse racing and, like, you know, betting and all this. You know, can you a lot more Gwent and stuff when you're in Novigrad. Just you're just becoming like a little character in that village or in that town, and it does help. It does help make the quest a lot varied. You sort of know what you're going to expect in those places.
Did you ever play Gwent standalone?
I played it once.
Oh.
Yeah, once. Sorry. It was basically Gwent. I was like, I really enjoyed Gwent to an extent in the game. I loved part of the reason I love the game isn't the game itself. It's the friends that are playing it and making fun of the sort of the switch in tone between, you know, this sort of self-serious game that's, you know, it's about rescuing a adopted daughter or whatever, and it's, you know, there's a lot of you know, murder and, you know, politics. And then halfway through, you go to the sort of main character and he goes, "Have you found my daughter?" And you're like, "Fancy a game of Gwent?" you're just like, how about a game of Gwent first? And they're like, "Okay." So like, it's just that every time you think the game's going to take itself too seriously, there's always an option for Gwent. That's a nice way to control the tone.
It's such an icebreaker in a way from all the seriousness. Just like you say, "Where's my daughter? Don't know. Can I play a game of Gwent?"
Because I'll make sure I'm gonna rob you of your best Gwent card just while you're waiting for your daughter who you think's dead. Yeah, God, it's just and that's actually what I really like about it. It's that tone. It's that balance of tone is one of my favorite things. So if you're not being sent to murder, you know, a potential king, then you're being sent to find a frampan for an old lady who lives in a house along the beach, and you're just like, this is just, you just don't know. And I think I could just never tell what that tone's meant to be, you know, because everything's delivered in such a dry sort of like almost dry tone, but a little bit of variation where you're going, is he taking a piss out of this game, like, or is this all being played straight? I don't know what's going on, and that always trying to keep yourself second guessing is why the game works in a lot of ways.
The other reason why I can't gel with The Witcher 3, and this sort of ties into the quest design and stuff like that there, is, again, the world and the quest sort of gelling together as one. There's something about CD Projekt's games, and this applies to Cyberpunk as well, and I'll touch upon Cyberpunk in a bit more detail later on, but like, the thing that really makes me sort of standoffish from The Witcher is how overwhelming it can get. Because like, there's a lot of things to do within the world of The Witcher 3 anyway, and like, what you like, even down to the minute sort of quests and side quests and main missions and stuff like that. There's just so much to do, and like, you think that's a good problem to have. But when you sort of overwhelm the player a little bit, that can also sort of be a double-edged sword in a bit, in a way.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not a compulsive. Like I say, I'm not a compulsive. Question mark ticker offer. Like I see those as, well, I think after the first hour, you sort of like almost don't see them on the map anymore. You know, like I say, I know a lot of people will want to be taking them off, and they see the game completion as ticking off all the question marks. But I'm just I sort of see them as, you know, if I'm going from one place to the other. Usually, I sort of, you know, do a lot of the main quests and a couple of, you know, big side quests. And if I'm going along a certain path, I'll steer that, you know, from one town to the other. I'll steer the path towards the question mark so that I have something to do on the way. So I use them more as like path guidelines rather than something that I feel like I need to, you know, go and complete. So I think it's actually really well, because you could easily ride from one part to the other. I know that, you know, people say there's a progression in playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, but I found that game, I didn't like that. It didn't gel with me at all. I just found it actually, exactly the problem of not having any question marks or anything. Is like you could easily walk from one place across a huge field, and nothing would really happen. I think I was at one point pushing the stick forward to get from one place to the other, and I was on my phone waiting, and then just glancing up, saying, "Is he still walking?" Yep. What's this? Oh, you can't run because your stamina wheel's coming out. Okay, I'll just keep pressing forward, checking out whatever was on Twitter, and waiting until well, at least with Witcher, the question marks are an ugly way to do it, and it's not it's not perfect, but at least you know what path to follow, and if you're going to expect something to happen on the way, and just take a little detour here, and you'll definitely see something. But yeah, I understand that it is very dense, but I don't mind that at all. I mean, I think some people say, like I said, some people say the game is finished in the question marks, and people would, and other people say no, those question marks mean that there's so many different ways you can play the game. It's not do it all. It's you can play that game and just take a travel up the left hand side, and you'll get a couple of different missions. Take a travel up the left hand side, the right hand side of the map, and you get so many other question marks, and you can keep track of what you've done before, so you're not going up and down the left and saying this game's boring, there's nothing left. Like no, I've sort of like I'll go somewhere else on the way and find something, or I'll try and avoid the question marks if I want to go straight there and not be killed. So I think like I said, when I was playing Red Dead, I didn't have a clue what any of this map stuff was about. I wasn't I don't know if it was a lack of tutorial in that game, or I just didn't follow it, or or maybe too many gaps in gameplay. But I didn't know how to follow them up, and actually I thought I played Red Dead the same way people play Breath of the Wild, where I'm just walking out in different directions and seeing what I found, and that's whenever that's when you sort of realize that those question marks and markers are actually like a necessary evil, where like sometimes you need people, you need to guide the player towards a certain way. Because I literally thought I played I accidentally came across the first story. Well, that was actually obviously the game brought me there. But when it goes go back to this, someone I'm sure said a line about go back to this farm. And I was like, how am I going to find this farm? Let's keep on walking around until I find it. So and then maybe played another hour where I thought the side quest of skinning rabbits was the main game. I was like, people say this game's brilliant, and I'm out here collecting rabbits. It's like, for an hour, is this what the game is? Do people love these things? And then eventually accidentally came across the next mission. And then it wasn't until way later on, I think. Apparently I thought I was almost finished the game because I put in like so many hours. And people were like, that's like mission 3 you just found. I was like, I'm giving up. I'm not playing this game anymore. And then so yeah, eventually I found this big gold marker that meant that was where I was meant to go for the next story mission. So I think these things, that there is positive to these, even though they're a bit ugly. Maybe overwhelming. Yeah, maybe you don't put down question marks there straight away. And maybe there is there's like a nice sort of balance you can do. I think what was it that what do you call that one you play as Aloy? Horizon Zero Dawn. I think that did it quite well, where you wait until you get to a certain point. I think it's the same, and a lot of the Ubisoft games are doing the same thing, where you wait until you get a certain point, you basically climb the tower, and then you can unveil more as you go along.
Yeah,
that's I like that, because it's not so maybe some of the UI is a bit old fashioned now in Witcher, but for me then it was great just being able to actually show me where stuff was.
I think that the example you said about Horizon it was absolutely perfect. And actually, and it's like by all extent and measure, Horizon should have put me off, because like a lot of that game can be overwhelming as well, like to me anyway. But like I think what Horizon did was, like you say, the way you sort of go about the world and just sort of open up the world more and more and more as you sort of progress around the world anyway. Like I think that sort of helped add a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for?
Just direction and filter.
Direction and focus basically. Because like once you're sort of done with one part, you can just sort of go about to one or two others and just say and open them up a wee bit more. Like whereas with The Witcher, at least from what I played of it felt like immediately overwhelming off the jump anyway. Whereas with Horizon, you could just sort of go from one zone to the other, and just sort of, like I say, open up one or two, and then you'll have sort of your main quest, your side quests and stuff like that there. Yeah. I think that's sort of what helped me actually get over the hump on that one.
Yeah, because didn't Horizon also use as well as the lack of question marks, that they had the fog, didn't it? Sort of they covered the map as well. Certain parts, so there was a rail, you couldn't see anything, and ahead of your sort of your own region. They opened it up, yeah. So I think I actually thought, that this map is quite small on Horizon, but it does open up, as you go along.
So story then. What did you think of the story?
Story's okay. Do you know, it's not. It's you know, it's not. It's not the story. It's Geralt. That's the interesting part. He's just. I think he's just a really.
He's just window
great,
shopping, basically.
dry. Yeah, great dry character that He's like all those sort of gruff older characters that they pretend they're gruff and they've always got some heart to them. There's always one daughter type character that always gets to their heart, whatever. But yeah, well, I mean the story's it is a bit there's these two people and there's witchers and they go and he's trying to save his adoptive daughter and you're like yeah it's okay. The main story's okay. It is to me the best part is when it doesn't take itself so seriously or it mashes together all these weird, because again, because it's the first time, playing a big open world game as well in that sort of like fantasy setting, there is probably a lot of his tropes that I hadn't seen before, but I just love how they mash it all together from the serious to the silly to the plays and the fran pans and then but all mixed in with a serious story so that. And they always do play it straight. There's no one laughing at themselves, but you don't know if Geralt. You can never tell a Geralt's voice if he's saying this is really stupid or if he's saying this is a serious thing I have to do. And you just that voice is just perfect for not quite telling you exactly what. You can't tell if it just crossed the line and they're ridiculous, and it never does. He always keeps it like he's playing a serious role, but. Like, is he winking into the audience? Is he not?
The one thing that is probably worth mentioning in regards to the story aspect there is actually a quest that happens. Where does it happen? It's you can get near enough to start the game anyway, or a few hours in it, or definitely a good few hours in it anyway. The Bloody Baron quest.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I don't know. It's one of the game's more infamous quests. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I remember just thinking, wow, they've really went there, haven't they? They've really gone there into these sort of like gory, personal, and a lot of I don't know how to. Yeah, it felt like they'd really gone very far into what you had to do, but I was distracted by the fact that I couldn't kill them 3 witches. And they kept killing me. And I don't know if it wasn't high enough level. I couldn't get up that path where there was 3 witches. And by the end of that quest, I was so annoyed that I wasn't even really paying attention to the story. But yeah, I know some people say it's a highlight. Some people say it's not a it went the wrong direction with the high sort of sadistic and serious. It took the themes, but yeah, at the time I didn't really notice that much. I was just like, yeah. To me, it seemed like they'd taken some old gory police story and put it in verbatim, into The Witcher, which they do that a lot with. Is it Baba Yaga in there? I'm not sure if she is, but they definitely have these sort of similar type characters that taken from police folklore and put in there. So I didn't. Yeah, people talk about it in retrospect as really standing out, but I guess at the time it was just another mission.
Well, I think that's. I was just going to say, it just feels like it just stands out as another mission. It's just another quest.
Yeah, it wasn't that. I mean, it was. It is weird because you could cut that part from the game and it would still be a whole game. It didn't. I know people talking about it as a side quest, but maybe technically it is. But you do have to come across it. But yeah, it didn't. At the time, then it was definitely a bit but yeah, the sort of gameplay took over and I sort of got through it.
So yeah, talk to me about some of the characters, because obviously there is Geralt, and you sort of mentioned how he's sort of this sort of typical by the numbers tropey sort of gruff voiced man.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously Ciri as well, and her story, and then you also get Yennefer and Triss at numerous points in the game. You get that love triangle basically. What were your sort of thoughts there?
So obviously having not read any of the background on the characters and being presented, so obviously the first time you have Yennefer, she's sort of presented as your girlfriend. I think it's sort of this is or you sort of like the one you're meant to love, and there is a good bit of banter. You can tell they're very similar together. And then so you think that's a nice relationship. And then you meet Triss, and for me that was the first time meeting Triss, and I'm like, she's quite nice and flirty, and having fun, and she's got a nice actually a lot more freer and funner, and I was tempted. I was tempted by Triss. I was. I was running about. I think I was running about the maze. I don't think there was many options not to do that. Run about the maze, whatever, and she's like, "Do you want to?" I think she was coming in for a kiss, and I was just like, "Sorry, I'm with Jennifer. I can't." But I was, I was like, "This is a nice person." Maybe if our lives had bound a different way, it could have ended up together. But no, I'm quite happy where I am. I don't want to give up.
Such an honourable man, even virtually.
I know. I also I didn't. I know. There's a lot of people because I tend to play these things mostly honourably. And then there's some friends who are playing, and they're like, and the people who are playing are women, and they're around shagging everybody. There's one of all these. She was like, "Yeah, I went to a whorehouse the other day, had a wee shag." I was like, "What?" It's like, "What?" It's like, "I thought you were good. I thought you was Jennifer." She's like, "It's only a game." I'm like, no, it's not only a game. You're too deep in these characters to be. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing to Jennifer. She's all fighting demons. And like, she's doing the same thing. I was like, no, that's not true. If I'm not doing it, she's not doing it. It can't be true.
Considering there are so many people who run around basically trying to play with people in Mass Effect, and I say play lightly, I am quite surprised. I'm a bit surprised anyway. And you not jumping at that chance?
No. Wouldn't do that to poor Jennifer. Say poor Jennifer. I would never call her poor to her face.
No.
But no, I think it would have been like my life would have been. Oh no, yeah. I really enjoyed that quest actually. Where you do go off with Jennifer and that the mystical binding. Because you get a lot of old tropes where like someone's been under a magic spell, and then they realise, oh no, I do love you the whole time, and then you're like, but they had to go and actually do a physical fight to try and destroy, this sort of magical spell, and that was a quite nice way of making sure that they did actually have something together. I think at the end, I think he actually says, I think I'm about to say, is there an option to say like, let's spend time together and give it a while? I think it was like. How might know if you love someone if you only come out of a magical spell after how many years, but yeah, of course so the whole love triangle. I hadn't read anything, and so the same friends that are playing it, and these are two women that are playing, my wife and their friend, and she's like, Triss is a bitch. I'm like, whoa, what? And I'm like, Triss is basically just like she found Geralt and she didn't. He was meant to be, I think he was meant to be with Jennifer, and he had lost his memory, so we basically shacked up with Triss. I was like, well, we didn't remember who. Like, no, she knew who Jennifer was. She didn't tell him, and so that changed my opinion a bit of Triss looking back. If I had to play the first two, and that was in it, I might have been like, Triss, you can just piss off if you're going to be like, taking advantage of me whenever I'm not. I don't have any memory of what I'm meant to be doing. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad I didn't have that before I played the game. Otherwise, it would have been no jeopardy. It would have been no moral choice. It would have stuck with Jennifer. But yeah, there's a strong dislike for Triss amongst the especially amongst the women in our sort of group of friends. They're just don't like her at all.
There's a sort of anti-Triss sort of group, like sort of like the No Homer's Club in the Simpsons. There's basically no Triss Club.
That's what it is. Yeah. It's just, how could you even think about you went to a whorehouse like 10 times in the last game? It's like, yeah, Triss. It's like, all right, no Triss.
No Triss. No, there's no. Speaking her name is banned in this household, basically. The other thing that I think is worth appreciating about The Witcher 3, and you actually alluded to it in part there, is how, again, some of the world design sort of changes around you as you go around each world. But I think the other thing is just how beautifully stunning this game looks anyway. Like, it's a million miles away from what happened with Cyberpunk anyway. And again, we'll touch upon Cyberpunk in a second. But like, The Witcher 3 anyway, like, it felt like a massive next gen game, especially because of how it looked anyway.
Yeah, I think like I was saying, that was part of the appeal. When it was looking at what are the two games coming out this year, and what's going to sort of like what's going to look awesome on the hardware and stuff. And then when I did upgrade to the PS Pro, I definitely made sure to get that 4K textures, and I think I went back to play one of the. I hadn't played all the DLC at that point. I went back and played some of the DLC, and they added on HDR, and I got a nice new like OLED TV, and it was like I was actually sort of thinking, I turned around. It was one of the DLC where was it Blood and Wine, where you get your own wee house out in the wine country. And I was just playing around, and I turned around, and the camera spun towards the sun, and I had to look away because it was too bright. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I think like HDR is going to almost change game design in a way and world design. But it was really interesting to see. But yeah, just how gorgeous it does look now. Even now, going back to play, I think last year I went back, and it still looked amazing. Obviously, I did download the 4K textures but that only adds so much. It's the models and the actual art design just looks so good by itself. Even another completely redid the menus as well. After a certain while in the game. But I think that all looks really polished and great, and all their even all the bestiaries full of awesome art and all as well, and really awesome character designs. Again, I know a lot of it dips into Polish, or at least sort of inspired by European folklore, but their spin on it. It's just their take on it is so good and detailed, and I think those witches are pretty. The spectres are pretty spooky. They do a really good job with those.
I think the other thing actually I just sort of realised in terms of the feel and of the game as well, and tying in story and your sort of past backgrounds. There's some common cutscenes as well, like sort of drawn out. Like, how did you find those?
I think they were lovely. I didn't catch on for ages that they changed once you based on the game status. I think maybe at the start I was playing a few side quests, so it took a while before that changed. But I think that's one of the better examples of the comic scenes, and they only ever really appear at the start of the game as part of your loading. Which it's got a really nice style to it as well. I think when you see it at the very end, it maybe feels a bit like they didn't have enough money for the cutscenes, because the characters were being played out in this, or the story is played out rather than a world catch up. So I definitely liked it better when it was in the loading, or the intros rather than the sort of like the resolution in a way.
You mentioned one of the expansions there, Blood and Wine. But let's delve into sort of the other expansions and like how did you find them anyway?
I didn't play them for years. Afterwards, it was my wife actually bought me the lovely physical versions. Now, when I say physical, it's got a game code in the box. It's a bit of paper with a game code, but it comes with the actual Gwent deck. So you get all 4 Gwent decks if you buy both physical editions. So they're really really gorgeous physical items. And we've played Gwent with a few friends. I'm not very good at it in person, and they obviously play it in the house together. So they have more training than me. But it took me the longest while to go back. And it's like you're saying. Actually, I did find the combat tough to come back to after being so. Sort of, I felt like I was really, by the end I was quite adept at it. I was able to, like I say, time those side steps and the swings and step back, and I could, if I needed to, I could run circles around the enemies and dip in when I had to, avoid their hits, and be quite tight at it. I think I beat the final boss in the first time because it was just by the time I got there, it was well balanced, so I knew how to sidestep all those moves. I found it really hard coming back into it again. It was the basic combat was fine once after a sort of like. That first big golem thing you fight was sort of okay, but there's a witch. You went to this fairy tale land, and the witch, she might have been actually maybe that was the Baba Yaga. I think it was. I just found her really really hard to fight, and I think she was throwing projectiles and turning into a tiger or something. But it was just like it was really hard, and I thought to myself, it was at a time where I actually had less time to play games, and I was like. Can't sit here and play the same body for an hour, or 2 hours. That would take me 2 weeks. So I went down to easy, actually, or maybe actually average, maybe call it normal. I think I may dropped down to normal or easy, and I thought at this point I'm only going back to this a couple of years later to check it out on 4K and to play the story and finish it off. I think I played the first hour of one of them, and then something happened that I never went back to. So I went back and I finished them off, and they were good fun. I think. For me, it was very, very broken because I played like the first hour of one and then stopped playing it for some reason, and then came back and played like another 2 hours a year later, and then a year after that came and finished off the story. So I was very, I didn't quite get the same experience as just being stuck in The Witcher. Getting really in the middle, but it was still fun to revisit the world and hear the old looks like rain. All those little class, Geralt speech,
Those sort of
catchphrases,
one-liners, basically.
Just like back in the world and hear those things and play a game of Gwent and stuff. So it was good fun.
I'd be remiss, obviously, if I didn't ask if you'd seen the TV show or even read the books afterwards.
Yeah, so my friends read the books. My wife has all the books in the house, but I think she read the first two. But I haven't myself. I haven't read the books myself. They're there on so she has like 6 in a pile. But so in theory, they're also at the bottom of my pile. But there's a few books to go before that, so I haven't really get around to them. But we watched the first season of the Witcher series. Thought it was really enjoyed it. Thought it was really good. Henry Cavill's really good as Geralt. Yeah, I mean a different sort of Geralt. Probably again, there's no he still does have that wee face every now and again where he's like I might have a sense of humour despite being this dry-ish character. So there is a little bit of obviously he doesn't stop and ask the Queen does she want a game of Gwen right before right before she's about to be murdered or whatever. But I think there's enough implied humour almost. There's maybe a little wink that says I am playing this gruff character, but there's something there to me that it still works really well. Yeah, I think it does. I think it'll be interesting to see the next. There was a slow pace to it, but I enjoyed it because I knew I was going to watch them all. I knew I had the time to watch it. But to say watch it, I think I watched them. Probably was that weekly or was that a?
No, it was all
one
go.
I think we watched it over a couple of weeks, maybe the weekends or whatever. But I knew I was going to watch it and sit and enjoy it. It was a bit, it was nothing. I wasn't overly, waiting to see what happened next, and it wasn't overly. It was just an enjoyable. Was it like 6 episodes? So it was short enough that you weren't going to be worried about. It's just going to be interesting after 23 episodes. You get to sit and watch whatever. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed it.
I'm actually going to double check how long the first season was.
I think it was like 6 or 9, wasn't it? Wasn't too many.
Because I feel like it should have been more than 6 episodes at least.
Looks like it might have been 8.
Yeah, 8 episodes.
Yeah, so I knew going in, it wasn't a massive commitment.
Oh,
nice thing to watch. It says that actually isn't that. It says there why is Witcher series so bad? I really enjoyed it.
No, it's not so bad. Yeah, you can probably get those done from over the course of a weekend, haven't we?
Well, you haven't got 2 kids on it.
Elephant in the room, because this is the first CD Projekt Red episode we're sort of done with my favorite game. Cyberpunk 2077, have you had a chance to play it yet?
No.
Fair enough.
No, that's it.
Fair enough. Next question.
No, I like the look of it. I like the look of it well enough, but I don't really. I think people buy into a lot of hype that if someone can make a good game, then they're going to automatically make a good game next. I never buy into that. Like you can make a 10 out of 10 game, then your next one can be 7 out of 10. Because especially when you're changing over genre, you're changing over. I'm sure a lot of the writers were different. It was based on a different IP. So I'd never been into those sort of like sci-fi, pen and paper RPGs anyway. I'd never really been into pen and paper RPG at all. So I guess I seen people. I just knew people. This thing was being madly hyped, and it was like this is one of those things where
it's just going to spiral out of control.
This is No Man's Sky. This is all that stuff. We're massive hype, and I mean it can deliver at times. I'm sure there's been games that delivered before, but those things were being sold on a marketing campaign before there was any. I think there was a point where some journalists had played a demo and said it was good. So that's when I was more interested. I was like, okay, people are saying actually the gameplay is good. It matches up with the lovely art direction that you can sort of see they have. But I don't really tend to. I don't pre-order games at all because I know that you can easily put a flop or you can easily. I try to only play if I'm gonna play a big game. I'll only play big games that have been really well reviewed and something like 9 or 10 out of 10. Just because I know if I'm going to invest so many hours, I can only play one a year, and I'm going to play the one that I know it's a bit of I'm only going to play the ones that are popular, but I'm only going to play the ones that have been really well reviewed, by a lot of people because I don't want to be sort of stuck with a sticker that I've bought and I can play 10 hours and now I can't, now I've wasted my one game a year.
Yeah.
So, but I heard that. I mean, even despite all the bugs, and I heard of the bugs and stuff, so I didn't want to, and I mostly play on console anyway.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't even that worried about maybe I'll give it a go on PS4 and then Pro, and then I have the Series X, and I heard it's working quite well, on that. But I didn't hear enough positive stuff about the game itself to actually make me want to play it. People are saying, it's okay. Like, well, there's a few sites. I mean, a lot of the smaller sites, I think, and I don't want to be like to disparage them, but I know a lot of journalists would get carried away by the hype as well. And yeah, especially people that are running smaller, not like yourself, smaller blogs, not like smaller blogs, no. But I mean, I think a lot of people here who were really, really looking forward to it were ready to give it a 10 out of 10. In that way. And I think unless it had been really, really bad, So the way I can sort of see it seemed to be like a 8 out of 10, 7, 8 out of 10 game, and the bugs are bringing it down further than that on average. So maybe I'll play it if I hear a bit more, but I'm probably not really that incentivized to play it.
I mean, for me, Cyberpunk 2077 is a lot more up my street anyway than, like I mentioned earlier, how in terms of Bethesda games, anyway, Starfield is a lot more interesting to me than Fallout or Skyrim, because that sort of setting and theme is a lot more interesting to me. And the same can be said for Cyberpunk over The Witcher anyway. And I was one of those people who sort of got caught up in that sort of initial hype for it because again, setting and theme and all that there just sort of spoke to me, and also because of that I felt a lot more excited for it than I would say The Witcher 3, because because at that point CDPR had sort of proven itself with The Witcher anyway. I think besides the bugs and sort of broken aspect of the game anyway, I think the other thing that sort of that actually carried over from The Witcher is actually somewhat the overwhelming nature of the sort of quest design and world design in that game, and how they both sort of mesh together. And that's sort of evident as well in Cyberpunk as well, beyond The Witcher. So I think I played the like the last time I left it anyway, which I think was earlier this year. I played the section of the game that they sort of demoed just after they re-announced it at E3, and it was fine. It was fine, I guess, but it wasn't, oh my god, this is best game ever, sort of screaming from the rooftops type wordy game, basically.
Yeah, actually, do you want to put me off at the start, like not playing it, but whenever they announced it was going to be a first-person shooter, that was a lot of the action. It's so hard to get that right. Like, I don't know. I did. So what did I play? I played not Fallout, but the Outer Worlds. And the shooting in that is some clunky stuff. It's like it doesn't. I play a lot. I play a lot of Destiny 2. So like that's really, really tight. If you want to play a shooter, that's that's on console, that feels amazing. Like every time you shoot a gun, you got feedback. It hits the right target. You know what you're doing. Anyone who I've seen who sort of moved into that, from a sort of narrative game first, as well, obviously Witcher's third person, it can be really hard to get that right. And I thought, Studio Project Red have the money to hire someone, or hire people, maybe they can do it. But I'm not going to assume that they know how to make a good first person shooter. So moving, I think actually if Cyberpunk had been third person, I think it would have had a bit more hype myself, thinking, oh, they're just doing, they know how to do this. If they had been a lightsaber rather than a first person gun, that would have been like, okay, they know how to do third person games with good narrative. I'm a bit more excited now. It was that then for screenshots of the guns and the hands. I'm like, oh, they're doing a first person shooter. I don't really like that the best of times when I'm walking around talking. I like the what do you call that? Those games on your it's another Bethesda published game, but it's the Arcane Magic one.
Dishonored.
Yes, sorry. So I enjoyed I enjoyed those two, but what put me off was that it was first person. So like first person with the hands, and it's not a tight shooter, so it puts me off. But then there was enough gameplay and they were short enough that I enjoyed.
So I'm guessing games like Dishonored and Mirror's Edge, which Mirror's Edge, or at least the first Mirror's Edge, had guns, but there wasn't the sort of big focus. Like games like that, then they would still sort of put you off,
Yeah, I think if you're. First person that isn't just a gun. Something about walking up to someone and trying to talk to them when it's first person almost puts me off. Just a bit of just going up and that's why I've never played Skyrim. Like my wife has played I've seen enough of it. She must have played like 200-300 hours of that game. Well, over different. She played like 100 hours, 120 hours on one, and then she played 100 hours and her PS3 broke. Had to get it fixed, fix the hard drive, and then restore her save and played another 20 hours, and then went on the she opened up she must have got it on PS4 or something, and then as opposed to PS3, and then played it again another 80 hours, and then she got the VR version and played probably about 100 hours in a row. I was like, get out of there! You're not here. You don't live in the Matrix. There was actually, I bought her the PSVR for Christmas because she wanted to play Skyrim VR, and then I came downstairs, and it had been like a month or two later. I thought she wasn't going to bother playing it, and she must have just got some time. Must have just found some time to herself. I was working upstairs or whatever, and came down, and she was wearing a headset. And I was like, oh, she's getting it, she's playing it. And then, so she took off the headset, and she was like, oh, you know the way to say VR can make you like a bit dizzy or something? I was like, I sort of am feeling a bit dizzy. I think, maybe one of them people that it affects. I was like, oh, how long are you playing for? She's like, oh, for like 4 hours. And I was like, you were in that headset for 4 straight hours?
No fucking wonder.
Yeah. I said, no wonder your eyes. I mean, if you sat and watch TV that close for 4 hours, you'd have a buzzing headache. So she's like, well, that's okay then. And then so she put about another 80 hours into it in VR. And then I did give it a go in VR, and I was really impressed. I did feel like I was in another place. It's still a bit low res for me, and on that some stuff, a bit of pixelation, but I still feel like I'm not getting the best out of the art direction, which is obviously a big love of mine. Yeah, even just seeing 2 hands on a sword puts me off. I'm like, and I see her hacking slashing people, and and it just looks weird. It's the worst animation. You just go chink chink chink. And it's so seeing 2 hands and talking RPG puts me off.
I think the fact that you mentioned as well that sort of transition of how CD Projekt went from basically third person RPG to first person shooter RPG. And it could be used as a case example of how not to transition. I think on the opposite scale of that, and it's a game we actually mentioned earlier, is Guerrilla and how they did it from Killzone to Horizon basically. Because Killzone, besides Killzone 2, Killzone was a okay-ish first person shooter. Although Killzone 3 was not a great game, if I'm being honest. Like a great looking game, but still not a great game. But Horizon was, and bear in mind this was a brand new IP in a genre they hadn't done before, and was basically pretty much going to be a showcase game for the PlayStation 4 on a first party level. Like when the PlayStation 4 was about midway through its cycle. And I think how Guerrilla managed that transition from Killzone to Horizon was nothing short of impressive and nothing short of incredible. How they managed to do that is just beyond brilliant, and I think that's sort of why people are definitely looking forward to Horizon 2 anyway. Yeah. Because it's just so, I don't know what else to be said.
It's really, really good. But and saying that, actually, because I haven't played, Cyberpunk, and people said actually the first person shooter stuff is actually quite good. Do you know that they say
it's alright. It's okay.
So I heard it was better than what you expect for a first time developer doing that stuff, but it's quite fun. But it didn't seem like it was at the level of Destiny, obviously.
I think what Destiny 2 has there is that already it has a developer that's sort of already entrenched in the FPS genre, and Bungie, they know how to sort of nail down properly good first person shooter gameplay there. I think that's sort of why Destiny is able to sort of nail down that element, because Bungie sort of learned a lot of that from Halo anyway.
And like for me, like for a while, I was only playing Destiny. Do you know, it was like I was doing raids of people online and stuff, and doing a lot of that sort of thing where I was playing for a while every night. Whenever I get a chance, and so it was like I played a lot of that game. So I was so entrenched in that sort of like that feedback loop. Of like nice vibration, nice shit, like tight shots, and people down. That any other first person shooter felt a bit. Even like going back to like. I think with the Halo 5 came out after that. Halo 5 would have come out after the first Destiny, I think. Yeah. And it was still fun, but just not having it didn't even feel like the shooting was as tight anymore. It felt a bit looser than Destiny, and then going to Destiny 2 felt tighter again and even better. So any first person shooter is really gonna need a lot to sort of like appeal to me.
Yeah, yeah. So back on The Witcher then. What else do you like about The Witcher 3 then that we've not touched upon here?
I think I sort of mentioned before, but a lot of my love of the game doesn't necessarily come from like directly from playing it. It's from, I don't want to say memes, like, because I'm not really a meme person. I don't really get them. Do you know? I know that I just seem like a lot of people making in jokes, but that's exactly why I like The Witcher. Because I can make, it's like, oh, I actually like this property. I can make in jokes about it, but it's not the one. It's sort of like, not the almost the one that are online, but just like a group of friends that ended up, like someone might play Skyrim, but she didn't. Outside of Skyrim, she would have played a lot of like Nintendo style stuff, and for a while she hated 3D games. She was like, keep my 2D stuff, and then she moved into Skyrim, and that was her one game that she used 3D. But then once she moved into Witcher, and she loved it, and just again the same sort of like silly, like silly catchphrases and the one-offs, and even the tropes of the game itself were like repeated dialogue, were like, looks like rain, and all this sort of like what else like the wind's howling, and all these little things, and just like, so then again, it was one of her friends, and she I don't think she was a big gamer at all. I think her husband, like a friend, he would have had a PS4, and he played The Witcher, and he was playing Red Dead 2, and she picked him up, and now she's played all through The Witcher like 3 times. She went back and she bought the first 2 on Steam, and she read those. She read all the books. So I think it may have been something to do with Geralt himself, but at ends she only plays games that have like older rough men that are looking after young daughter types. Or young kids. She played God of War.
A particular theme is starting to emerge.
Exactly. So she really enjoyed the God of War, where it was the old bearded guy looking after a kid, and she really liked this. So it's like we're sort of making fun of her. Have you got a type? But she really got into the franchise, and someone who wasn't traditionally a gamer, So then just a few of us were all like, just like sending rubbish, like silly, we all had drinks and played Gwent together, and just so it's all those little things that actually come. It's that whole like there's so much silly stuff you can laugh about, and it comes out and expands beyond the game itself and becomes a bit of a cultural. No, I wouldn't say much is a cultural phenomenon, but it's definitely there's cultural touchstones there that you can sort of refer to, and it becomes all the silly things and silly glitches and stuff, and just I think all the stuff that maybe. You would have thought if you were, building this game, and if you were trying to build a serious site or a serious fantasy game, you would go through QA and cut that stuff out. We're like, oh, it's really silly when he wants to play Gwent. Oh, it's really silly when he has a super side quest in the middle of a serious story. But they're the things that actually really reach out to you and make the game fun, and you can talk about outside of the game and actually make the whole experience more interesting.
What didn't you like about the game?
What didn't I like about the game? I was hit and miss on being forced to play as Ciri. I know our powers are quite different, and I didn't mind it for a start. I was like, oh, it's something different. I get to play as her. I'll get to speed around and do something different. I just thought sometimes you're just thrown out of your own. If you're playing that story, you're thrown out into a different section, and you're like, oh, this could have been optional, and then I could have went anytime I wanted, rather than being forced at a certain time to leave your own story and pick up another person's story. I'm going to say your own, I mean Geralt, not me personally. This is I am Geralt. I didn't say I hated those parts, but and they were fun whenever we actually got to do it. But sometimes it just felt a bit long, and they were at the wrong time. That's what I'm not like. I just in general I hate crafting. I hate deep crafting games. So having to, pin your recipes and stuff onto things to try and make them is a bit annoying. I wish, for me personally, I wish that sort of stuff was a little bit more streamlined. Where it took me a while to catch on. I'll really nitpick some of the menus which let you slowly load. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go too far into that. Some of the mutagen stuff. Obviously, you can go deeper and deeper into as a game player, but that stuff went too deep for me. Sort of like combining the mutagens by color just to get a tiny perk, and it felt like I played it a bit and then didn't really touch it until very near the end of the game, where it felt like I needed a little boost in my skills. So a lot of that stuff was just a bit too deep without a proper tutorial. or without. But I mean, it's good. It's good as there, I suppose, for other players who do want to go deeper. But it didn't really hold that much interest to me in those sub menus.
We can't really sort of compare the trilogy and sort of provide a top 3 list because you've not played 1 and 2. So, what would actually no? I'm skipping a question here. Like, what would you change from a design point of view?
Oh, there's a big question. The thing that's probably moved on since then is the fast travel. It's just you had to reach a certain post on the road before you could travel, which can be a bit irritating if you have to go along a path for about 20 seconds before you just hit travel somewhere else. So that instead of just being able to go through your map, which is always quite handy. Again, these are just little small things, and probably the combat does need sort of like an update now. Like say I went back and found it quite difficult going back a couple of years later. Probably just need, I know that they have an option in it where you can take away the natural turning of Geralt, so you can walk in and if you start walking backwards and you sort of do a 360 or do a U-turn, there's a bit of an animation. It sort of takes it feels a little bit sluggish, and you can turn it off so that he spins around and walks back. I think it actually might be nice to have something like that in the combat, where you can actually make the animations a bit less realistic. That's a big ask, that you're almost asking for 2 different systems there, but that one based on speed and one based on animation quality. What else would change? That's probably it.
So we can't really give a top 3 list on Witcher games because you've only played 3. We can't.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, but Witcher 3. Definitely.
Number 1 Witcher 3, number 2 Witcher 3, number 3 Witcher 3. So yeah, we can't give a list basically. But with that in mind, like considering how long has it been now? It's been 6 years, coming up 7 now. By the time this nearly comes out, it's become one of the more beloved RPGs of all time. Certainly one of the more critically acclaimed games of all time. What do you think is The Witcher 3's legacy in that regard then?
Going forward, do you mean, or what?
I mean in general.
I think it's a strong. It's almost like it's a really good character that doesn't do anything. Does that make sense? There's a character, the Geralt, that it's very understated, but playing it doesn't feel like he's a blank canvas either. And I think having that character interact with this massive world, I think that, like you've seen, the Witcher TV series wouldn't have happened without the game, even though it's based on the books. Technically, it's taken the brand, from the game. And I think when you just see that that really interesting world full of really horrific monsters and the sort of like queens and and kings and stereotypes and princesses in that way, and you put this sort of like you put this character who is so close to winging at the camera in there and having so much fun with it, that I think that really made the game work, and that's something that people are going to try and or have been trying to copy or or at least take on from them. I think that's probably the big legacy that's leaving behind.
Go for it.
Okay, so yeah, some of the games I was thinking about, quite a recent game is Dead Cells. Love it. Give me so much like adrenaline and yeah, just that. I've been waiting for a game that sort of speed, so that sort of speed, that sort of that gameplay, the instant that constant that constant feedback that keeps you really what's the word, like a serotonin rush. And I actually had to delete the game from Switch because I was just dipping into it too often, and so that one more runs became too many runs, so it's gone now. But I love that. I thought it was just a really brilliant. And I generally don't like pixel games, although I end up playing those of them because they tend to be the side scrollers that coming from like the side of the Sonic and the Mario from from a very early game in this. That was a really brilliant game. Let me see, what was funnily enough, what I started playing last year was Fantasy Football, which isn't a console game, isn't anything. It's basically that Venn diagram of people who like football and math. So it's just people are like, I don't watch football. I don't follow any team. It's basically just funnily enough, it feels like it's a live RPG, is how I sort of describe it, where you pick your 11 players, you have a budget, so you have they all have their own stats, and the weekend those players go out and play football in real life. It's people from like Man United and stuff go out and play football, and you get a score based on their performance and their goals. And so you get to make the big thing then is you get to make one free transfer every week. So you're out there scouting the stats. You're getting advice on fantasy football websites, and this is like from I didn't watch a single thing last year at all. I started playing this game, and it's become a hobby. So instead of going in and just picking that best squad, and once you're in a league, you're competing with other players who you know, and you want to beat them. So it's a real brilliant mesh of that sort of like that mainstream football fans. And people who like playing games and who like switching in. I'm obviously coming from that and I still haven't watched the game. I'm only checking the scores, and that's it. So what else? Be on my list. I was very tempted to go for Ocarina of Time. I love that game. It's again, my wife went and bought it, played it for the first time when it came out on the Switch. The cloud version. It was. And I remember just a few things like not being able to jump without jumping off a ledge. That was not what happened. You could sort of hop over a ledge, but you have to jump button, I think. So I think it might be a bit too clunky to go back to and play myself. But that was a game that I absolutely loved. And even we've been trying to get that music playing sort of like mechanic and a sort of modern version for a while. Haven't found anything sort of that is as good or we had a few prototypes, but we tried to build stuff like that.
You said you were playing Ocarina on Switch, right?
My wife was playing it on Switch. Yeah. I think it was it on Switch. It would have been on the. Yeah, is that part of the cloud?
I don't know if it's even been no, because they're not making N64 games available yet on Switch.
Is it Wii U? The end of
maybe Wii U, Wii U or the 3DS version, is it?
Well, she hasn't got a 3DS, so
okay.
it might have been the end of the Wii U. Or where she was playing. I think she's playing it on TV, so she had something out of that or the Switch version. So if it isn't, I think she played. She's also playing the one that's like a top-down one, but it's like 3D.
Link's Adventure.
Yeah, and
Link's Awakening. Sorry.
Yeah, and she was playing Wind Waker as well. So were they all at the end of the Wii U?
I know Link's Awakening was on the Switch. I know.
Oh, yes, she went from one to the other. So it was through a TV. So she's playing on that. I think anyway. You sure? Is it not? I thought is the new Mario on the back out again?
No, new Mario. So Mario Odyssey and Super Mario 3D World are a port of Super Mario 3D World from Wii U is on Switch anyway.
Okay.
So Odyssey and 3D World port are on Switch. Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild and Link's Awakening's remake is on Switch. Ocarina, Majora, and Wind Waker are not on.
Okay.
And Twilight Princess aren't on Switch yet. But because of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion, Ocarina and Majora should be on there soon.
Okay. So. I didn't finish Majora, so I might go back and play that again.
Any others?
Mass Effect was a big one, but it's been so long now that I sort of forget half their names. So it's, half the characters' names. So I wouldn't. I don't think I could really talk about it. But it was the first. I think it was the first game that I borrowed off someone. So like people, it was recommended by a friend, and he gave me the whole. He must have given me the first two, and then the third one was coming out. Whenever I was playing 360 again, quite early on, and it was like so it was brilliant. Really, really, it was the first time really getting into them, because I played Gears and stuff, and I played Halo, but the stories there are pretty, action-packed story. But it's the first time we really got invested in the characters, and no, I didn't try and shag everyone. I think I saved myself for Tully. It's with the visor, is that right? Yeah. I always say because I could see myself, and maybe perverse way, but I think so it was really close. I think those were the top few.
Top 3 games. What would they be? Which are at the top? What was
at the top? And I mean, probably probably would be like Mass Effect would be up there, and Ocarina. Probably put them 3 up there. It is weird. Like I would say, like I had more instant fun with Dead Cells, so I'd be tempted to bump one of them off for Dead Cells and put it back up there again. Let's say Witcher 3. Witcher 3, and then let's just stick in Dead Cells there for the most recent fun, and then put Ocarina above Mass Effect. More in terms of the feeling that I had when I first played them. Like wow, this is something different. This is what I've been waiting for. So
since I've done one of these episodes, but we get to talk brand new games.
Ooh.
We get to talk brand new games. We get to talk about someone making a brand new game, Jennifer Wilde. So yeah, like talk to me about what was the sort of process in trying to come up with that concept.
Yeah, so actually, I drew the comic for Jennifer Wilde about 10 years ago now. So it was Rob from Atomic Diner. They're a comic publisher down in Dublin, and Maura McHugh, who was the writer, and we and then I come on from the early stage of that to design the characters and basically draw the comic from there. So I drew that first 3 issues, which is what we're adapting for the game. Drew that it was 10 years ago now, I guess. And then but just finished Wellington Heights, which was our body hopping musical adventure game, and we wanted to move into a new game and really focus on the point and click adventure game audience. And it was sort of like always in the back of my mind, I'd always thought that Jennifer Wilde would be a brilliant detective noir story game. So I said to Rob, look, I'd love to adapt this into a game. So I think they also have that benefit of there's a story that's ready made. And that it was nominated for and won several awards, so that that it was working well with readers and stuff. So and in the back of my head it was like this I can imagine these scenes as puzzles and point and click adventures. So I said to Rob, look, here's Wellington Heights. This is what we've done. We want to do Jennifer Wilde next, and he gave us a little bit of money to build a prototype and bring it to NX Screen, and then put some more money into it, and then sort of got our finishing funds from Kickstarter, and then the game. The script we had ended up doubling in size, so we sort of said to the backers, like, we're going to take a bit longer, but we're going to put our own money into it and make the game even bigger. So like it was great having that 3 issues just to sort of build off, and so obviously as I'm enjoying it, I also have I've readers will see what's happening on the page, but in my mind there's more happening. There's more context, more backstory, and sort of being able to get that into a bigger, wider game is really cool. And we'll have Maura come back on again, more the dialogue and obviously the whole story for Jennifer Wilde. So she's coming into she's doing all the dialogue pass. I'm basically taking the comic, doing game design and direction over, taking that and sort of putting them into game design, and then Maura is taking my game design and doing a dialogue pass on all the characters, adding more depth and more chat. And she's at times you're like, oh, I wondered when Maura's like, oh, I can't get to it for a while. It's like, oh, do we need another writer to help write and stuff? And I just can't. There's nobody else has the voice of Jennifer, and she does a really brilliant Oscar as well. That's like the way the game works. It's like when I'm first doing the game design, it's like, hello, my name is Jennifer. Hello, my name is Oscar. Let's do this puzzle. Here's a clue. Blah blah. And so it's all very much designy and sort of like narrative design. And then Maura comes in and it becomes two characters that are alive and chatting and banter and a bit of snarkiness, and it's like, yeah, it felt like it was always meant to be there. That was always meant to be how it was going to be. So that's so the very basic story is then that in the first, a few mild spoilers, but in the first sort of scene, Jennifer's father dies, and just suspects there's been a murder. So she goes to his hotel room and finds the locket. And as a kid, she can see ghosts, which is a partial loss that she sort of grew up. But she tries.
Haley Joel Osment before Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah. So so now she tries to funnel this this lost power and tries to call back her dad's ghost, but she accidentally calls back the ghost of Oscar Wilde. It turns out Oscar and her father had an affair together. So there's more. She actually didn't know a lot about her father when he was alive, and just learning more about him after he dies. So it's a sort of a game of like lost opportunities and not getting to know anybody, really getting to know someone when they're alive. So basically, it's Jennifer and Oscar as a sort of sidekick, and they travel around from France to London and Ireland, and basically have to solve the mystery of Jennifer's father's death.
Talk to me about the sort of art influence, and especially sort of coming from that sort of comics background and then sort of transitioning it into video games, like how you sort of found a place to sort of level the two out in terms of its look anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was one of the big goals of forming the company. Part of the reason, obviously, the Outsiders was influenced by the comic book Outsiders podcast, but also we were also like two people that weren't making games before or had very limited experience in making games in the industry and coming from comics and programming. And we were not looking from outside the industry, coming in trying to make something a bit different. So yeah, we're taking our influences, and we basically wanted to make it look like a moving comic book. So what we've been doing so far is a sort of a 2.5D approach. So far, we're well in the heights. All the characters are all hand drawn. All the all the backgrounds are hand drawn, but they're placed together in a 3D scene in Unity. So it does feel like you're walking around in a world. And it has its pros and its cons. It looks lovely. Sometimes it can look a bit like a pop-up book if you don't do it. It takes a lot of work to make it look right and make it. If it's a comedy like sort of half comedy like Wheel Heights, and you can sort of get away with that. But with Jennifer Wilde, we wanted to make it a bit more. We didn't want to have things popping up and just looking a bit fake. So it's more like a side-scrolling adventure game. So you sort of you only move the side to side and sort of taking out the depth. I think it's working really well. I think so. I sort of gave for Jennifer Wilde, I gave John, who's our artist, John McFarlane. He drew basically like all of Jennifer Wilde, like 95% of Jennifer Wilde, and I gave him the comic and showed him that sort of black and white grayscale that I'd done for the comic. I think the comic was done that way because Rob loves that sort of like pulpy noir comics that were all published in the sort of like the 40s stuff, all black and white, and I think it is cheaper to print to be honest. I think that might have helped. But at the same time, The Walking Dead was out and it was doing really well in black and white. I thought, God, would it not look really awesome if we actually did an ink wash style, but as a video game? With all that sort of like it looks like it's on a pencil and ink and it has like an ink wash. So I showed John the comic, and he basically took that, but also he obviously he put his own style into it. which is like really, really heavily detailed and a lot more like he does a lot more research, puts a lot more like he spends a lot more time drawing all those scenes, and they're absolutely beautiful when you see them. So and then it's already won a few awards for its art direction. It's and he does God, John always does a brilliant job when you ask him to do something. So. Yeah.
It's worth mentioning, considering the sort of noir aspect of it. Did you ever get to play LA Noir?
Yes, yeah, played that on the 360, I think. So, yeah.
What do you think?
All right. I think that there was a time when I expected too much from games. Where basically they were saying like you're going to be able to read the players' facial expressions and see a lot about it. But I obviously thought these characters were double bluffing me.
Exactly. Yes.
So I was like, well, he's sort of like turned his head to the side. He obviously wants me to think it's a lie. So he's being too obvious about it.
Exactly.
So it must be the truth. Like that. And then so I sort of went and got, and they were like, no, didn't you see that he winked? They're like, what? So it was a weird. And I think I don't know if it did end up double bluffing you. And at the end of the conversation, you're like, that could have been anything. I would have been more chance of getting it right if I had randomly guessed, the answers and it failed so many missions. So so it was interesting. I enjoyed it, but I definitely saw the flaws in it, and it wasn't quite ready for what it wanted to be.
Yeah, I think also what sort of impacts LA Noir for me is just I don't mind realistic graphics. I love realistic graphics if they're used well, but like LA Noir, especially in regards to the facial models, just felt like too uncanny valley for me.
Yeah, I think it was very weird having that like, and it's still a case in many games where you have like this really awesome detailed character, detailed face, detailed hair, and they come in wearing a suit. It looks like it's made of cardboard, and you're like, hello, and you're like, well, why is there a floating face going in on top of this really bland, horrible suit model? And obviously there's a lot of people putting work into that, and I think a lot of people probably saw their faces being ruined by those, and they put a lot of budget and time into the faces, but it was even worse on Uncanny Valley because it was only the face was doing it, and it did feel like it was a separate game that was like almost like you played the game with those faces, and they stuck a background including the bodies around those faces. It's a little weird. Yeah.
Just to sort of preface that, like I say all that about sort of the facial models being Uncanny Valley and a lot there. I'm not saying that just to solely kick on the game, because I do love LA Noir a lot more than probably a lot of other people, but like that aspect, and to a lesser extent the interrogation aspect, just sort of like could have been a lot better. The other thing I sort of wanted to pick on in regards to Jennifer Wilde anyway is just sort of the transition, and I think you might have alluded to it there, is that transition from Wuthering Heights in terms of it's a bit more of a colourful game, whereas with Jennifer Wilde it's black and white anyway.
Yeah, I just thought, I think it was, so I had a look at the comic and went, there's something here. I think there is, because Jennifer Wilde set in the 1920s. Yeah. Where would have had a lot of obviously newsprint then was black and white, and any sort of comics that are printed on newsprint would have been the same. But we had that sort of like illustrative ink wash over the top of it, which is still black and white. So I think and then obviously you have a lot of the noir films, which were all filmed and produced in black and white. So I just thought, and then we did a test, and it went down really well. People thought it really looked well. I think it just stands out. I know, like, funnily enough, black and white stand out amongst the colour, but it makes it look different. It gives it its own unique style. Something that I really want. I think if you look at Wuthering Heights, you can look at the comic book and the sort of like the animation influence. And it doesn't really look like any other games, on the market. And then if we look at Jennifer Wilde, it's the same sort of thing. I think if you saw a screenshot of this game, you would say, "Oh, is that from your game, Jennifer Wilde?" Because it looks different from everything else. So yeah, that's part of the big reason. Just want something to stand out and something that looks visually cool.
Talk to me as well then about some of the lessons you're sort of bringing over from that's the Jennifer Wilde anyway, in terms of the point and click aspect anyway, because it feels like, because you say as well, like it's a 2.5 sort of platformer, point and click type game as well. Anyway, how do you sort of mesh those elements together and make it feel a lot more cohesive anyway?
Yeah, so with Wuthering Heights, I was being a bit selfish, and I only play with console. I only play with controller, or I did then. because I say I was being more of a console player than anything else. So I was just like, yeah, it's just the way the game is. I think we played. There was games like with Zunk. They made Stick It to the Man. It was a big. It had a platform aspect, which we don't have. But it was. I thought, okay, you can make this sort of like, I'm not even sure if you really heard the term point and click back then. It was just like, let's make a game where you do a lot of talking and solve the mystery through puzzles. And then someone was like, yes, even that's called an adventure game. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it was. So I basically ignored the point and click aspect. I did. I mean, vaguely I knew that that's another way you can play these games, but I thought sort of the modern audience had moved on and they were maybe playing with a controller. And some of the feedback was, no, we want to play point and click, because obviously it launched on Steam first, and they were like, you built up a point and click game without any point and clicking. We're like, so it is. It was a weird hybrid of sort of modern controls and self control, walking around, or direct control, walking around and talking. So it works well for me. But for Jennifer Wilde, I thought, well, build up from the start and give players the option. So it works in both. You can directly control both Jennifer and Oscar, and you can walk around the scene. But like I say, we're taking away the depth, so it's a side scroller, and there is like a 3D, like sort of 2.5D scene, but the side scrolling action is side to side, so like a smaller say a game that's actually more directed towards that sort of point and click audience, and you can point and click the whole way through. And then, funnily enough, now point and click is my favourite way of playing the game. So I prefer having the freedom to click on objects rather than having to walk with Jennifer. So it's going to have both.
Sort of like that semblance of, oh, I see what they mean now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, okay, so click on an object instead of having to walk to it, then press a button. It's like it works well for console, but yeah, I can see why it's like, why. Yeah, exactly.
When, where, basically.
Jennifer Wilde?
Yeah.
I'd say probably, we're going to go out this year, but it needs another dialogue pass, and it might then hit the Christmas rush, so it might delay until early next year. But have a look on our Twitter feeds and see when we're going to do it. We haven't announced a proper launch date yet, but it's soon, very soon. So I mean, it's basically it's playable from start to finish. I just need another pass and dialogue. So.
It might actually be a bit of time this comes out, so it might be worth bearing and the where.
Oh yeah, so we're going to release on Steam first. But I guess if you follow our socials, you'll get a better idea of links and stuff. So it's Outsider Games on Twitter, and we also have Outsider Games on Discord and Outsider Games on Facebook. Funnily enough, we got those, and then outsidergames.com, which. And there's a mailing list there as well if you want to actually sort of keep up to date. But if you go to the Jennifer Wilde, the full title is Jennifer Wilde, Unlikely Revolutionaries. And there's a wishlist page there's a Steam page there now. So if anyone wants to wishlist it, or buy it if it's out. Or at least have a look at the trailer. It's there for you.
Finally, I feel like you just basically did the fucking thing. I asked you to do it.
I wasn't sure if that was a prompt or.
No, it wasn't a prompt. I was just saying. The reason I was saying when and where was just basically, are you going to put this on consoles at some point and all that?
Hopefully at some point, but if we're going to launch on PC. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to My Favourite Game, a podcast by PlayDiaries.com where people from the games industry come on to talk of their favourite game. If you want to listen to future episodes of My Favourite Game, as well as press play before they go live publicly on Play Diaries and other podcast platforms, please consider becoming a $2 tier podcast early access patron to our Patreon at patreon.com/playdiaries. Next week, Jess Campbell on Ratchet and Clank. Until next week, bye bye.